Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors, episode 149.
Welcome to Life by Design, the podcast for chiropractors. Here's your host, Dr. Jamie Richards.
So, Shawna, welcome to the show. Tell us a bit about yourself and let's dive in.
Well, I'm a chiropractor. You probably guessed that. I graduated in 2000, so this is now, 22 years in practice. When I say those numbers, those are the numbers that freak me out because I remember, years and years ago when we were first at Parker way back in, 2000 and 2001, hearing doctors who had been in practice 20 years, and it just seems so freaking old.
We're not old, Shawna.
No, I know. But I met my husband, Craig, in chiropractic college. We graduated in the same year. We have started practicing together. When we graduated from chiropractic college, our son was about 8 or 9 months. So we had Jackson, our first, when we were in our last year of chiropractic college. And that was crazy. We've since had 2 more kids. So our oldest now is 22 and Jenna is turning 18 in June. And Jackson I do that all the time. My kids make fun of me. Cole, our youngest, just turned 14. And so, it's like many, many years of craziness. Any of you who are parents and you run your own practice, you know how every different square of your life brings its own awesome things and its own chaos into it. And then the more kind of different aspects you have, the more craziness you have and the more great things you have. And it's always a balancing act. I realized a long time ago that the word balance, we tend to think of it like it's a noun, right? Something you want to achieve. I can't wait till I can get balance, or someday I'm going to have balance. And I realized that balance is it is a verb. It's a minute to minute, always looking at what is the most important thing that needs to happen right now, and how do I kind of make everybody, including myself, happy and joyful and productive and moving forward in joy with some sense of peace amidst the craziness of life. And I've been in and out of just about every kind of practice. My own practice, I've been an associate, I've been a locum doctor, I've had high volume, I've had low volume, I've had some volume. I've had literally
I love the practice styles. I didn't know about the some volume practice.
Well, Jamie, I think a lot of us are in that right now. It's like, where is this all going to settle down to? And I've had many years just staying at home with my kids while Craig kind of captained the ship, and everything was good and everything had its challenges and everything made me think of, is this really where I want to be and how I want to do things? And so I would say that where I'm at right now, the style of practice that I have, I started this one back in 2018, and it's been such a blessing for all of us, for our family. And I can truly say, this is it for me. This is the way I have always wanted to practice. All those years of trying to figure out what works best. How can I make it better? Do I need to be home? Do I need to be in practice? How do I establish that sense of peaceful balance for myself? How do I get everything that I want while at the same time giving the most important people in my life the things that they need and the things that they want? And I feel like the way we do practice now, it is perfect. Love it.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's go back. So you come out of school, you had exposure to lots of great people. You were talking about Parker. I believe you guys were part of CJ Mertz. Like you had lots of exposure. What was the thought process and the vision that originally got you into this? Okay, we need to see like 500 visits a week. Like, what was the mentality there? And then tell me about how that felt when you were in it.
Yeah. We were never with CJ Mertz, but no, that's okay. We certainly surrounded ourselves with lots of Mertz people. And I think that the coaches that we had at the time, whether it was CJ, whether it was, the coaches that we had, I honestly think that at that time, everybody was just coaching from the same playbook, right? It was the idea of high volume practice, discount, scholarshiping, like however you want to call it, right? You can call it discounting or scholarshiping or whatever, but essentially it was different prices for different people or family members coming in, but it was all designed to, how do we keep the most number of people in practice. And if we have to give on pricing, that's totally fine, because really it's all about the volume.
Right.
So I think that was the only thing I ever heard. It was the only thing I ever really knew. And at the time, I guess it just made sense to me. But what it did, and I didn't know it at the time, I only know it now looking back. What it did was it really devalued what we do, and it devalued the uniqueness that we have as chiropractors. And I have to tell you that it breaks my heart what they are teaching in chiropractic college now. The fact that they have gone so far away from the critical nature of the subluxation, and us positioning ourselves in healthcare as those people who can correct subluxation and then see what the body does on its own. It's heartbreaking that kids are missing out on that now. But sorry, I'm diverging.
No, no. I
What
mean,
I mean to say,
it's a
though,
great point.
yeah, and not all chiropractic colleges are doing that, but
Too many of them
there
are.
are lots that
Yes.
are.
Yes.
So I think that was the big thing, was not not really valuing each and every adjustment for what it was. And therefore, it seemed okay to put a discounted price. You know, you want a family to come in. I get it. I mean, I'm a family chiropractor. I have a fellowship in pediatric and pregnancy care. When I came out of chiropractic college, 75% of my practice was under the age of 13. So I wanted families. I wanted babies. I wanted people to feel like, okay, I get if you can't afford full price for your family, let's figure out what price is going to work for you, and we'll just get you all adjusted. And there's value in that too. But again, everything comes with a cost, right?
Sure.
In the end, how do you want this to play out for you? And as business people, I think that's what there was never enough emphasis on, was that first and foremost, we run businesses, because if you can't keep your doors open, it doesn't matter how great a chiropractor you are, you can't provide people a service if you can't keep your doors open.
And let me ask you this: what did it cost you? That's what I really want to talk about, because I know you personally, and we work together. What did it cost you to have that kind of practice when you look back at it now?
Well, financially, it cost us a lot.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to go into the specific numbers.
Sure.
But I think that
What about emotionally? What did it cost
right. Well, just financially, I just want to say that if you ever wonder if your CA is making more than you are, like, I get that. We have times like that for sure, and especially with both of us, where one doesn't have this awesome job at Google, for I don't know.
Right.
Google,
yeah. Exactly. I
some
get
great
you.
company where you're making a salary, right, with great benefits, where you can kind of balance that out. There were both of us, so financially, it had a huge cost to it. Emotionally, like I said, for me personally, there was just a lot of chaos. I think I can't speak to this as a man, but as a woman, right? We are so wired to be connected and be in relationship with people that, for me personally, having that many connections, caring for that many people, it was a huge emotional load. It was exhausting. And on top of that, I didn't like being a high volume practitioner. I just didn't like it. It wasn't for me. When I would get to about, I would say 75, 80 people, I always felt like there was a switch that flipped for me, where I couldn't spend the time that I wanted to be able to spend really connecting with people. If a mom was having trouble latching, I didn't have time to take her upstairs to a nursing room and sit her in a rocking chair and say, okay, do you want to show me? Let me see if I can help. There just wasn't time. And that's where I started to feel like, this feels more mechanistic to me, and that wasn't what I wanted. So I was doing something that wasn't congruent emotionally with how I felt. And then just hours, we were putting in long hours. And when you've got both parents, both putting in long hours, you've got kids in daycare. So I remember driving out the driveway of our office sometimes at like 6:28 to get to the daycare that I had to be at 6:30. And, somebody who was scheduled at 6 or 6:10 and they were late, I'd be waving to them on the way out, because somebody had to pick up the kids from daycare. And, I didn't want them standing outside the daycare. stressful. And then you just get the kids home, they're home late. Now we have to
Yeah.
have dinner, and our kids went to bed at like 7 or 7:30. It was, from a family perspective, it was just too much. It wasn't how I wanted to be doing things.
And it seemed like, if I remember correctly, you hit this point where, because that was the only model you really knew, and it wasn't for you. And we said this. We did a webinar earlier for Life by Design for chiropractors in the elite group, talking about, look, if you want to see 1,000 visits a week, that's great. If that's what you
Yeah.
want, right? If that's
Yeah.
what drives you. And so for you, it wasn't. But you didn't really know of another model, or you never had been introduced or thought about it. And so your natural instinct was just to step away, right? You
Right.
stepped out of
Yes.
practice and kind of, I don't want to say gave up, but you're like, all right, well, I'm out. I'll figure it out from here.
One of my very first coaches, he actually told me, he said, well, Shawna, I think the only answer is for you to leave practice. That was the first time I actually left practice and stayed home. So as a coach, and he was older, he'd been in practice and retired. And like I said, it just seemed at the time like every coach kind of worked from the same set of rules. And so when the things that I wanted didn't fit, I was a square peg in a round hole. And so then the only answer was for my coach to actually say, I think you need to stay home with the kids.
Fired.
And understand, he didn't tell Craig to stay home, or he didn't say one of you should.
Right.
It was me. And so, and I've talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women chiropractors over the years, and we definitely feel that until very recently, there was really kind of one way of doing things. And if you were a guy, it was most likely going to fit you better than it was going to fit those of us who were women in chiropractic. And especially if you were like you were the sole chiropractor in the family and you were the woman. But I would also say, for those of us who are couples, when you're the wife, you're still like, you have all the chiropractic stuff that you're supposed to do,
Right.
just like your husband. But then you also have all the, and you can't see this if you're listening to this as a podcast. I'm air quoting here, all the wife stuff of
Yeah.
running the home that
Yeah, no,
most
I
of us
get
have
it.
traditionally been raised with.
Yeah.
Crazy.
No, I didn't. You're right. As a man, it's hard to understand that, right? I mean, I see in my dynamic with my wife, she handles a lot of those things, and to think about having to also handle those, I'm like, wow, okay, well, this is enough as it is, and then add those other things in. So, I mean, it's tough to appreciate, I'm sure, unless you're a female chiropractor, also having those other responsibilities. So, kudos in that sense. So, let's talk about how you got to where you are. So, you took the time off, and at some point in there, you and I met. We started working together with you and Craig, and so on. And somehow you got to this point where you thought, you know what? There's a different way I could try this. What does that look like? Just guide people through your thought process, because I bet there's people thinking, well, that's me. I would like to make this transition.
Okay. So we met you in 2016. Well, we actually met you before that. We had done a couple of your marketing boot camps, which were awesome. And we started coaching with you in 2016. And at that time, Craig was full time in our practice in Aurora, and I had been at home already for a couple of years with the kids. I was still at that point about 2 years away from opening my practice. There was a big gap there.
Yeah.
And I think I said this in the podcast that we did back in May of 2019. There are so many things that we learned from you that were absolutely practice changing. But the single biggest thing that comes to my mind is the idea of profit, in that a lot of the other numbers are irrelevant if you are not thinking about how do we turn a profit in this business. And it was funny because it's not like we'd never talked about how much we make versus how much we're spending, but we had never really thought about it in terms of the word profit and how do we have a profitable practice. And I think even as I'm saying it now, where I'm so versed in thinking about the value of profit, it still feels a little bit wrong.
Yes,
It's
feels
like,
taboo, right? For sure.
right. We are schooled to be martyrs in this. We are schooled that if you are
100%.
focused on profit, you're a money grubbing so and so.
Yeah, you're not
Right?
serving.
It's
You're not
not
serving
noble.
chiropractic. You're not serving
Right?
people.
Yeah. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think doing things with integrity and doing things authentically are really important. But any business has to be focused on how do you become profitable? Every business other than chiropractic,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
does that, right? And it's
Somehow it
okay.
doesn't follow the rules, right?
Yeah. And it's funny too, because I think even as women are just, we're taught somewhere it's unladylike to talk about money, right? You don't talk about money.
Right.
So when I talk to female chiropractors about practice, one of the first things they will always say is, well, it's not that it's about the money, but blah, blah, blah. And I'll be like,
Right, right.
hang on a minute. Do you think it's bad that you value money in this? So maybe it wasn't so much for Craig. I can't speak to his mindset in this, but for me, the idea of, how do we be profitable in this? How do we be as profitable as we can while still giving obviously great value, great service,
Mhm.
everything, right? The everything package. But at the bottom line, you end up with some kind of profit. Thinking of things in terms of that was probably the most practice changing, because what it does is it makes you think about, how am I delivering the best possible adjustment? How am I delivering the best possible service? How am I listening in the best possible way? How am I hearing what my patients need in the most important way? And how am I communicating what we do and ensuring that there's a good fit here in the most effective and efficient way? And then the end result, if you do all of those things really well, you end up being profitable. So
Yeah, and
it's
I
kind
think
of
you're
a,
saying, Shauna, something that people forget, and until you start charging more for the service you deliver, I don't know that you really get it. And when you start charging more, you realize you have this internal, you know, not, I guess, a drive or a desire to make sure that you're delivering what you're charging for. There's an
yes,
integrity issue
exactly.
that way, right? Whereas when you're charging too little, I mean, if I'm being honest with myself, I'm sure there was times where I thought to myself, I'm just going to mail this, adjustment
Yeah,
in because this person's paying next to nothing. And as much as you say you don't do that, it's really, it's reality.
totally true. Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. So we started looking at all of our systems. And I think the other thing too that really became apparent is that we don't have to adjust everybody. We don't have to accept everybody as a practice member in our patient and or in our practice.
Yeah.
And that was like the polar opposite of what we
Right.
had always been told, where we had always been told, if they walk through the doors of your practice, you're there to serve them. That's total bullshit. That is not true. And I think that is what becomes so soul sucking for people in
Ugh,
practice, is that we end up with all these people in our practice that they are not a good fit for who we are and what we do. And who ever taught us that you have to be everybody's doormat? You
yeah.
don't. And so you really taught us to figure out, what are your values, right? Remember the values exercise
Yep.
that
Of
we're
course.
all supposed to do and
Yep. Yep.
do just, as human beings, but it's good to do with our patients. It's certainly good to do with chiropractors. And when I looked at the things that were my highest values, so one of my highest values, freedom, and another one is authenticity.
Mhm.
And I think that's when I realized that the thing that always made me feel kind of unsettled in practice, like I had something that I liked, but it just wasn't quite the right fit, was that I had people in my practice that were not congruent with who I was. And therefore there was a feeling of inauthenticity
Right.
that never sits well with me. And I think, I heard somebody say on a leadership podcast last week something that so resonated with me. She said, you can be authentic in your business and still fail. But if you are not authentic in your business, you will never be successful. And I thought, bam, that's what it was for years, where I felt like there were certain people I could not be my authentic self. And so part of charging what you feel is the right price and the right value for what you do is knowing that not everybody is going to want to see you, right?
Right.
If you charge a higher price for your adjustments than other people in town, there are going to be some people who will simply they will exclude themselves from your practice because they want a better deal.
Yeah.
And in my office, like that wouldn't be the right person for me. We don't want
Right.
people who want to make a deal. We want people who want to do the work and get the value and see the value and value themselves. I think that's the other thing. And it's something that is much easier to communicate to a patient, that I value health. I value it for me and for my family and for my patients. I want you to value health too, but you have to value it. And for the people who can see it's not about the price, it's about what am I getting for this? What is
Yeah.
different about this office? They don't care that it's maybe a little bit more expensive, and they don't need all the fancy
Well, I think it's
discounts
tough
and
for chiropractors, who are moving in that direction or struggling and not moving in that direction to reconcile that that's actually possible, right? I mean, I'm sure I was in that place for a long time where I just couldn't imagine that somebody would pay a certain amount for something, partly projecting my own issues of I couldn't afford to pay for it at that point.
right,
And then, as time goes on, you realize that now understanding, that I will pay more for things that I think are valuable, and so will lots of other people. And, it was Croatia who said it to me a long time ago, chiropractic is for everybody. And that helped me understand, okay, yes, I was caught up in this. All right, but I want to help people, and everybody should have chiropractic care. Yes, chiropractic is for everybody. You're not everybody's chiropractor, and that was just
right.
like, oh, right. If I'm only going to accept, and every practice is different, but let's say I'm going to have 400 patients, or you're going to have a boutique practice and you have 100 patients, whatever number your active patient base is, we think of it like you do now as we want to find the best 100 people or the best 400 people and accept their cases and work with them forever versus other people. And there's lots of ways to do that, and financial barriers are one of those ways. Shawna, let's talk about, shift gears here. You've got this practice, you took this leap, you went in and it was successful. I mean, we've talked about it and the numbers are great, all this stuff is really cool. You work the amount you want to work, which at this point is how often?
It's 11 patient hours a week, and then probably another 3-4 hours of admin.
Right. So 15 hours a week for a practice that's ultra profitable, right?
Mhm.
And things are going great, and then COVID happens. So let's talk about where, not everything is always great and perfect. You had this great practice, things were just rolling, COVID happened. Tell me what happened there, and what the outcome is and where we're going from here. Big deep breath. Go.
I know, right? So one of the things that I was thinking of as we're going through this discussion, I was actually thinking about COVID and thinking, I'm so thankful that we went through this whole process before COVID hit, because the style of practice that I have, it saved me from COVID. I mean, really, I only had to see, I don't know, maybe, gosh, 10, 15 people in a month to still pay my bills,
That's awesome.
like in a whole month,
Right, right,
which at the beginning, right? So when we could go back and we were only able to see emergency patients. So as soon as we could go back into practice on an emergency basis, I opened up my doors.
right.
And it was, I changed my shifts around. I only went in 2 hours twice a week and just told people, like, given COVID, we're just compressing things. But yeah, like even the first month, I could certainly pay my business bills. There was no question about, can I pay my overhead? Of course I can. Um, and so I was really, really thankful for that, because I was starting to go down that route of, we should buy a building, we should open up a wellness center here in Fort Perry. And then COVID hit, and I was like, oh, I'm so glad we didn't, because we were
Right,
dealing with all that with the practice in Aurora, right?
right.
The
Yeah,
staffing and how do we figure out how to social blah blah blah. You know what I'm saying, right?
exactly, exactly.
So having this very unique sort of low volume boutique style practice where people were very invested in their identity as part of Elevate Women's Health Center, it was great. The COVID, like everybody, the first couple of months were a blip: April, May, June. But by the end of June, I'm trying to think, no, it was by June we could start practicing normally again. So April and May, things were definitely less, but I found every week more and more people came in. The first week it was, maybe a handful of people, but by the time just before the CCO said, okay, you can go back into normal practice with all your policies in place, I was at probably 60 or 70% of my normal capacity already.
That's
So
great.
that was good. And then I found in July of 2020, our practice exploded. So I don't know whether people were thinking, okay, I got to look after me,
Yeah,
or maybe we've been locked down for so long, I got to get out and get back into normal swing of things. I don't know what, but
yeah.
things grew very quickly. And so it was great. But Craig joined the practice just on a very, very small basis. He was there sort of one afternoon, one short afternoon, and one short morning a week. Sometime in, I think it was 2021, back in the summer, and it was a little bit more to just handle some of the overflow, because I didn't want to increase my hours, but I couldn't fit everybody
Yeah,
in,
good
and
for you,
especially
and good for
given,
you for, knowing what you wanted, because in that case, a lot of doctors, oh man, we're growing, and it would be an easy decision. Oh, I'm gonna expand my hours, then I'm gonna grow more and expand, and before you know it, you're back to doing what you're doing before. Now, granted, way more profitable, which would be great, but you still freedom isn't just about the financial freedom; it's also about the freedom, the emotional freedom, and you would have given that
yeah,
up by
and we still do that. It's funny. I got together with Dr. Kelly Graham and Dr. Rebecca Sage, two of my best buddies in chiropractic, this weekend. We rented an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere and just brought a
nice.
bunch of wine and our running shoes, and
Sounds
we just
good.
talked all weekend. But that was one of the things that we talked about, because we all have gotten to this place in practice where we've really cut down on the hours that we see patients so that we can have all these great lifestyle things. I mean, Kelly's an Ironman, and Rebecca has all these other cool things going on in her life too, right? We all have reasons why I don't want to be in practice any more than that. And so, but we were talking about, actually, Kelly and I were just talking this morning how she's tempted to add more hours in. And yet I said, dude, summer's coming. Do you actually want to do that? And she's like,
Right.
no, I really do not. But these are the kinds of conversations that we need to have with ourselves. Will it really accomplish the thing that is important to me? And so I've gotten much better at saying, what do I want? How do I want to practice? What hours do I want to have? And no, I don't actually want to practice anymore. So
Right.
it worked out well that Craig, he had decreased the number of days he was going into Aurora so that they could handle COVID policies and
Yeah.
their volume and stuff. And so therefore it freed him up to be able to come into my practice a little bit. And it was perfect to handle the overflow. And we grew really well. But then here's what happened this fall. I decided to take on a virtual chiropractic assistant. So in the space that we have, and one of the things that makes my practice so profitable is I have this crazy low overhead. Like, my rent is so disgustingly low. It's awesome. But I only have one room. I have a room and a waiting room and a bathroom.
Gotcha.
So there really is no place where I can have a chiropractic assistant. There isn't a physical space for it at all, period. So one of the things I wrestled with is, how do I get some of the administrative tasks off my desk and into somebody else, um, but not they're not able to come into the office. So I decided to hire a virtual chiropractic assistant, and it made total sense. She was all trained up already. She already knew our software, like everything. If she was physical, she could have literally walked into my practice and just started practicing
Right.
as a great chiropractic CA because
Right.
I trained her. She was his live CA.
Okay. Gotcha.
So the problem was, for me, I was so relieved to have somebody come in and take on some of this admin stuff. And I think I was so kind of burnt out by doing some of that CA type of stuff
Yep. Yep.
that I just kind of went, oh, here, take it. And there wasn't enough training. And because we use a totally digital platform, we have no paper in our office, like not anything, not a single shred of paper. Everything is done digitally. So that's been kind of a shift, to take normal procedures that might be done face to face in person with paper and go in a file. And how do we do this digitally with somebody where we're not always having that face to face conversation about some of these things with the patient? But then I have an assistant who I can't just go out after a patient and
Right.
say,
Right.
what about this? Or did you hear from this person? Or what do you want to do about this? All those things that float around in our mind all the time, I have to somehow get down into a list that I can ask her about later. So I think that I just dumped a whole bunch of things onto poor Katrina without giving her sort of proper processes. And
Yeah.
some of it was laziness, and some of it was, I didn't even know that we needed a process for this.
Right.
And so what happened? And then on top of that, I think COVID just caught up with me, that
Yeah.
that languishing term they use for people in COVID, where You're not unhappy, but you're not content. I was
Right.
mentally exhausted by everything that was going on in the fall, right? Just having to try and think through everything and trying to figure out what the hell is really going on here. And I felt like people on both ends of the spectrum were saying things that were just crazy. And so I was trying to figure out, well, I have to be able to verify everything that I say. I don't want to say anything that I haven't directly verified. It's exhausting. And I think I just got so burnt out with COVID and everything else that I just couldn't be bothered anymore. And I could see it happening. I knew that it was happening, but I just couldn't fix it. I didn't have
Right.
it in me anymore. And I think a lot of people, I know my patients often talked about that. So it caught up with me. And then, of course, January hit, right, with Omicron. And oh my gosh, I'd have however many patients on the book for a week, and half of them would cancel because they either had COVID, had been in contact with somebody with COVID,
Yeah.
or they were in the midst of getting tested for COVID. Like that
It was
month was
crazy.
crazy. So numbers wise, I had no idea, okay, are our numbers low because of COVID, or are they low because fall was slower than I had expected it to be?
Yeah.
And then I didn't know, okay, in January, is it going to pop up? Well, now we can't tell because of everything that's happening with this new variant. So now we've had our first quarter. Things are definitely slower. Our numbers are significantly lower. And so the last, I would say 2-3 weeks, I've really been thinking about all the things, all those the basics, right? Going back to
Yep.
basics,
Yep.
looking at the
Exactly.
numbers again. Like when you had invited me to the podcast, I hadn't done my SSS for like a year and a half. So
Right.
I
Right.
had to go back and actually look at the numbers and what are our numbers like? And so when I sent you those numbers, I was actually like, hey, this is really good. But then I sent you a text a few days ago and just said, looking at first quarter of this year and looking at the last little bit of last year, I just want to be really transparent that things have gone down. Things are slower. Processes have not been put in place. Things have been dropped that shouldn't have
Yep.
been dropped. And we see it being reflected in the numbers. So now we're going back, and I've had some really good conversation with Craig and with Katrina, our chiropractic assistant, my virtual chiropractic
Yep.
assistant, to say, okay, there's a leak in the bucket here. How should we fix this? There's a leak in the bucket here. How can we fix this? It's all been about where are they going? Why are they leaving? What's our part in it? And then how do we create a loop that always has accountability, right?
Yep.
Always, always, always. We're never going to lose track of people. We will always be able to find out, are you in or are you out? But we're never going to look back at a list of names and go, holy smokes,
Right.
remember that person? I don't even remember. Like, I don't
Yeah.
even remember when they left or why. We
Yeah.
just lost track of them.
Well, I think there's a lot of really important things here, and then I'm going to transition to the final part where I just want you to share with docs who are thinking, I could do this, could I not do this? What your final parting words are. I do want to mention through all the challenges in the last little bit, you know, I don't think you're alone in that. I think that's lots of practices. One, kudos that you're aware. That's great. And this is also where statistics and a consistent auditing of your practice is really important because you can catch those
Yes.
things long before they happen, just like with our health, same type of thing. Test, don't guess. The other part of it is, as much as all that happened, just like at the start of COVID, you've had this drop now without the profitability that you built into this practice model. The stress and worry would have been, beyond. But yeah, now you look at it and you go, okay, so we had a couple slower months, but I was still profitable in those slower months, like extremely profitable
Yeah.
compared to where I would have been in a different situation. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the silver lining there. And of course, now it's time to get back on track and start to go upwards in that sense. And I know you guys are. So, why don't you leave people with a sense of, what would you want them to take away from this transition that you've made in your life in relationship to maybe something that they're thinking about right now for themselves?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to always be asking yourself, what do you really want? That's the question that for me started making everything different, was not worrying so much about what I thought patients wanted or what I thought chiropractic was about or what I thought my coach wanted or even what I thought my husband wanted. And, he's the one who means the most to me of anybody on
Right.
the face of this earth. But it really begins with what do I want? Because in the end, I'm the one who has to sleep inside my own skin at night. And I never want to go to sleep feeling like I haven't at least tried to be my best every single day. And so when you start asking that question of, in a perfect world where I could have anything I wanted, where money didn't matter, where you could literally snap your fingers and you would get exactly what you want, what would that be? What would it look like? And then stop saying, but I can't, or the but, right? The big but gets in the way. Think instead of, how can I? Not can I, but how can I? How can I have that? And when you start thinking in terms of expansion as opposed to resistance, that's when the answers begin to come. And then, just taking quiet time, going for walks, praying about it, meditating, whatever your thing is, but literally shutting down everything, especially your phone, and just giving yourself time to think about it and really sort of imagine what would be the greatest life for me. And then not being afraid to start figuring out, how do I go about getting that? I think we need to create a very different relationship with rejection. I think people are so afraid that a new patient won't want to join them. And I think instead we need to be grateful for the people who have stayed with us. But I think we should be equally as grateful for the people who have said no.
Yeah.
Because it just leaves a space for the right people to come in. So it's funny, when a child is learning to walk and they fall down, they don't get berated. They don't feel awful that they didn't do it, right? They just naturally just get back up and start trying. But somewhere, I don't know what age it starts, kids start to have a fear of failure. And I see it in my own kids. And the reality is, you're going to learn way more from the things that you do wrong than that you ever do right. So don't be afraid of trying something that is congruent with your values and not hitting the nail on the head the first time. Then you pivot, right? You just reevaluate. And again, that's where you're saying numbers. Numbers really help looking at, is this working? But also asking yourself, does it feel right to me? Do I feel good doing this?
Yeah.
And if it's not, you pivot, you tweak it, you figure out, how can I do it another way? And if it is right, you keep it, and then you just keep going on.
That's it. And I just want to say, and Dana commented in the group when I posted that you were going to be streaming in live, just the quality of person and doctor and mom and wife and all these things that you are and identify as, and I just reinforce that you're such a great person, and I think that's something that's so valuable in our profession, is just focusing on yourself and being self-interested in you having a great life and you being happy, and it just makes your life so much better. It makes the lives of the people around you, your patients, your husband, your kids, so much better. And it's been really fun to watch you go through this, growth over the last, I guess, wow, 7 or 8 years since we've known each other. You were already a formidable force when I met you, and just to see you, I just feel like you've taken this idea and just completely ran with it to the point where I can see the happiness in you when you talk about your practice compared to where we were at one point. And so it's really just
Right.
such a joy, yeah, for me to see that in you. And I know for other people listening, it's something that is possible for them, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to have you on today, Shawna.
I think that we, the idea of doing things for ourselves, again, gets a bad rap, right? It sounds selfish or whatever, but you cannot serve with love if you are not filled with it. First of all, you have to fill your own cup before you can spill that over and give joy to other people. So I really think that just spending that time and figuring out how to make yourself happy in all the areas of your life, all the things that we talked about in practice, we should be doing in all the other areas, as a parent,
100%.
as a married person, whatever, as a son, as a daughter, as a sister, as a friend, all of those things. What makes me happy? What's congruent for me? And then how do I share that in all the relationships of my life? So practice has never, ever been more fun. Okay, well, COVID honestly is taking away a little bit of the fun right now, if we're being honest. But in general, I would say practice has never been as fun. And I really have you and all the Life by Design team to really thanks for that. And I know Craig would say the same thing if he was here, but he's working right now on here at home, hanging out with the dog.
Well, we appreciate you saying that, and you guys are, great community members. It's been great to work with you, and we look forward to more. And thank you for joining us on today's show, Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic.